Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 106. In today's episode, I interview Dr. Ginevra Liptan, fibromyalgia specialist and author of the Fibro Manual and the Fibro Food Formula. Dr. Ginevra is also one of us. While she was in medical school, she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and promised herself that if she could just get well enough, she would devote her medical career to helping other fibromyalgia patients. And she's done exactly that. For many years, she was the medical director of the Frida Center for Fibromyalgia, a fibro-specific clinic in Portland, Oregon. In addition to treating patients and writing books, Dr. Ginevra has shared her fibromyalgia expertise all over the world, speaking to both patients and providers. Dr. Ginevra also created Frida Botanicals, a line of herbal and magnesium products designed specifically for fibromyalgia patients. With all her knowledge and expertise, you could easily assume Dr. Ginevra's fibromyalgia is under control all the time, every day, right? But guess what? Life happens to experts like Dr. Ginevra and me in the same way it happens to you. And in the last year, life has definitely happened to Dr. Ginevra in a big way. She's been divorced. She had to move. She closed down the Frida Center. She spent months with the worst fibromyalgia symptoms since she was originally diagnosed, along with severe depression and even some suicidal thoughts. Today, she is sharing her story, along with how she found her way out of the depression and the fibro flare to feeling better and rediscovering her purpose. Dr. Ginevra also shares how she answered the question many of us have when we're diagnosed. Who am I now? Make sure you listen after the end of the interview. Dr. Ginevra and I are hosting 2 special Fibromyalgia Awareness Day events this year, and we'd love to have you join us. We will have all the details at the end of the episode and in today's show notes. Go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/106. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here and coming to share your story.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So I mentioned to you before we started recording that I've had several podcast episodes lately where we've talked about the fact that, whenever you're diagnosed with a chronic illness or, other big life changes, having a baby, kids moving out of the house, getting a divorce, getting married, right? All of those things cause you to sort of ask the question, well, who am I now?
Right.
And you have gone through a lot of that yourself lately. And I thought it would be super interesting for our listeners to hear from you because, of course, you're the doctor. You're supposed to have it all figured out.
Right, which means I totally have it figured out. I wish.
But just that reminder that we're real people too. And this is what real people go through. So if you're listening and you're going through that yourself, it's totally normal.
Totally normal. Life happens and it's a little out of our control sometimes.
It is. So fill us in, since the pandemic and everything shut down and, life went on almost without us a bit.
Right.
What have you been up to?
See where to start. Well, first, I will try to get through my story without crying, but I can't make any guarantees because it has been a really rough ride. And this is kind of the first time I've talked publicly about some of this. So I do appreciate your generosity in kind of allowing me to share this. So the pandemic was, rough. And certainly I continued to have my private practice. A lot of my patients were really struggling, which meant work was even harder. And so I was trying so hard to kind of support people and a little bit burning the candle on both ends. And then my now ex-husband, I guess, just as of a few days ago, which is kind of the big part of the story that I'll get to, in 2018, told me that he wanted to leave the Frida Center. And And we had founded that clinic together in 2015. So those of you that have been with me a long, long time know that back in like 2011, I founded the first iteration of the Frida Center. And I had a couple nurse practitioners and PAs and myofascial release therapists that work with me there. And that was an insurance-based model and financially wasn't really sustainable because I wanted to spend a lot more time and I needed to spend a lot more time with patients than insurance reimbursement allowed. So that was a financial failure. I believe that is the word. So I closed that and then went back to kind of being, tried being a regular doctor for a while and working for other clinics and such, and that didn't work well for me. And I really wanted to get back to fibromyalgia. And during that time, Jamie, my now ex-husband, I encouraged him to go to myofascial release training. He'd been sort of drifting and trying to figure out his next step. And he's kind of been a Renaissance man, like done a little bit of everything. And I thought he'd be really good at myofascial release, which is a form of massage therapy that's super helpful in fibromyalgia. If you've not heard of it, go to myofascialrelease.com. Very, very good. The only manual therapy that helps fibromyalgia, but it's one that really helped me and helped a lot of my patients. So I thought, oh my gosh, how cool. Jamie will be like a great myofascial release therapist, which he is. And we would, it was kind of going to be my dream clinic, like me, along with somebody providing this service that I knew was really helpful to folks. And then also getting to kind of have like a family business and work with my husband. And to me, it was just like my dream come true. And, we did that in 2015, and it was a cash-based model, which enabled us to provide much better care for patients because we could spend as long as we needed with them. And then I thought things were going along swimmingly, but from Jamie's perspective, I think he wanted to do something where he could focus more on myofascial release. So told me he wanted to leave the Frida Center and go out on his own and join with a couple other myofascial release providers, which he did in 2019. And that kind of happened a few months before the pandemic. And I will say it was really hard for me emotionally. That was hard for me. And it kind of felt like he was leaving me, and this thing that we had built together. Mm-hmm. And then the pandemic hit, and it was like, like everyone experienced such a traumatic, devastating, scary time. And during that time, my fibromyalgia was not doing as well. I didn't have as much access, like everybody did, as much access to all the care that we kind of had, that I kind of had been relying on, to help manage this chronic illness. So, with the stress of the pandemic, I was really focusing kind of just on survival. I think a lot of us were kind of in survival mode. And during that time, started to have some just kind of marital struggles, I would say, and kind of not being on the same page anymore, and it was really hard and painful. And I still really wanted to work on it, and at some point, I guess, Jamie decided he was done. And in the summer of this last year, so July of 2022, he actually used those words. He said, I think I'm done. And that was like just so devastating.
Yeah.
Because I still loved him, and I didn't want the marriage to end. And I didn't want our business partnership to end. I didn't want any of it to end. And so, like life does sometimes, it sort of exploded all over me. And, I moved out and was living in a friend's guest bed. And, all of a sudden I like lost all of those things that I had been using to take care of myself. And even things as simple as like the food I put in my mouth, like I sometimes just couldn't really eat. And the food I did eat was crap.
Right.
Like,
I think we all can relate to that, right? Like when
even
we don't
though,
when
even
we
though I knew
don't
I was
feel
gonna
good.
feel bad.
Right. When we don't feel good, we're supposed to eat the things that are going to help us feel better. But
Like,
sometimes like that's just so hard.
I knew what I should be eating, and yet I was not. I mean, I think for like the entire month of August, I subsisted on like 500 calories a day of like chocolate alone. And, like all of the self-care things that I knew I should be doing fell out the window. And suddenly I'm sleeping in an uncomfortable bed. No offense, Natalia. I dearly appreciate your generosity and letting me live with you for a while, my dear friend. But bed not comfortable as far as, so everybody with fibromyalgia knows how important sleep is. And so suddenly, and I wasn't sleeping hardly at all because I was it was like all of a sudden my body was fully experiencing like a trauma, like that fight or flight nervous system activation, which I talk so much about in fibromyalgia and we know chronically is affecting us. It was like all of a sudden I was just like living a trauma every minute of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't sleep and I couldn't take care of myself hardly. It was just everything I could do to like get to work and feed myself. And basically I think I kind of fell apart. I think that is kind of what happened. And I just became, I was in such a flare. Like my fibromyalgia has not felt as bad as it did in the end of, last 6 months of 2022, since I was first diagnosed, or actually even since I first got sick, when I didn't know what the hell was happening to me in medical school. Like I didn't understand, I had no idea why I was so achy and so tired and so foggy. And it was like all of a sudden I was back to that, and I was like, oh my gosh, but 22 years later, I've written a book about fibromyalgia and how to improve. And like, here I am just like total mess. And
I'm sure that doesn't help either, right? Because then it's like, oh my gosh, do I even know what I'm talking about? Like, do I know anything?
Totally. And then I was like filled with sort of like, that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm a fraud, like that like people are gonna like see the real me, and I'm just like this, scared person, and I kind of lost like all of my confidence was just like out the window, like I lost, it took, my self-esteem took such a hit. And I think that really, I just retreated from like all public life, all, I like, not that I was really posting a lot on social media before that, but I just completely went into like hibernation. And I had some really dark times. I mean, I was really depressed, and I had some times where I was feeling so depressed and so like, what do I have to kind of live for? Almost, I mean, to be honest, like suicidal type thoughts. And there's two things that brought me back from that. One was, of course, my kid, who, wouldn't want to leave. But the other thing was realizing, like, if I leave the fibromyalgia community, like, who's gonna help us? Like, who's gonna be the doctor that freaking figures out fibromyalgia and helps people? And I was like, finding, like, that's what I kind of came to, as sort of finding a new identity, or like, I guess not a new identity, like reminding myself of that original kind of purpose, like what drove me to go back to medical school, even though I hadn't completely figured out fibromyalgia. I'd only finally gotten a diagnosis about 6 months into my medical leave from medical school. I only had about 6 months to kind of frantically patch myself together enough to kind of get back to school. And part of what drove me, people ask me all the time, like, how did you do that? Like, what drove you? I was like this, I felt like I was on a mission, and like I had to do it so that other people wouldn't have to feel as terrible as I did, and wouldn't have to be so misunderstood and mistreated by their doctors. So that fire that kind of pushed me back to medical school is ultimately what sort of pushed me through those darkest times and coming out on the other side, like, okay, like now it is time to dedicate my whole life to this, along with parenting. I've got a kiddo that I'm like, okay, here's my two purposes: fibromyalgia and my kiddo. And that was where I found my purpose. And once I could kind of come back to that and remind myself, like, find that inner fire, then I could sort of start to inch towards, like, okay, self, do I really want to eat that gluten-filled chocolate treat that's going to make me feel terrible? And there would be like a little bit more like, okay, maybe not. Maybe like I'll not do that because I know that I'm going to feel worse. Or maybe I can like get out of bed and go for a walk, like just those tiny little steps. Or even frankly, sometimes I was like, okay, just shower. Like all you have to accomplish today is shower. And like, I'm sure everybody was like, you're nodding, but people are listening.
Been there.
But like everybody with fibromyalgia has been there, right? Like, oh my God, I am too tired to freaking stand up in the shower. I'm too tired to like wash my hair. And I remember that from like when I first got sick, and it was like, here I am back to that. But it was like, okay. So I have made some progress by like making my steps like tiny. And I know, I mean, as a coach, I know that you talk about that.
It's all about baby steps.
Yeah. So how do you, like, if somebody that you're coaching or working with, or, somebody with fibromyalgia, that their life, they have a life implosion like I did.
Yeah.
And you get so knocked off your center. Like, I sort of found a way to kind of stumble back to it, driven by that fire or that passion. But do you have like specific, like, had I consulted you 6 months ago as a coach, what would you might have told poor Ginevra, who is, a sobbing mess on the floor?
You pretty much did it, actually. I think a lot of times, thank you, Nike, and the Just Do It campaign. But people think that we should all be like internally motivated to do these things. And most of us actually aren't. Right. So we need to find that bigger reason, that bigger purpose, like you thinking about, okay, I'm not going to eat that gluten-filled chocolate treat because I have to take care of my kid and I have all this fibro community I want to serve, right? Like it's a bigger reason. Just doing it for yourself should, quote unquote, be enough, but it's actually not for most of us. So you got to find that why, and then make your steps so stupidly small that you can't
trip
help but
over
succeed. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest things that we have to relearn with fibromyalgia, probably lots of other conditions, but I found with my own and with my clients, is that we have to relearn the fact that we can actually do things, right? That we can accomplish things.
Yes.
And so those baby steps aren't just about the thing we're accomplishing. It's also about creating that habit and that pattern of, oh yeah, I can do stuff.
Right. Even though that stuff might not be what you thought it was going to be. So a lot of my patients have talked to me about kind of grieving the loss of their former life, or grieving the loss of what they thought their future was going to be like, like I had a former patient who was an attorney, and her vision for her life was that she was going to be this like corporate attorney and like become a partner in the law firm, and which requires like 100 million hours a week, and it's just an insane there is zero life balance with that. And once she developed fibromyalgia, she wasn't able to do that anymore, and it took her a good while to kind of say goodbye to the idea, because she felt like she was going to be a failure if she wasn't doing that path. And it takes a lot to kind of shift your mindset, and it's not easy, and it sucks. Like, I wish fibromyalgia didn't happen and we didn't have to like make those kind of life navigation changes. But the reality is fibromyalgia can hit any of us. I mean, we're human, right? And we can get sick, we can get and a surprise divorce, like stuff happens that makes us have to like change our navigational course. And I think trying to find ways to kind of both grieve like I'm still grieving the loss of the marriage I thought I had, because I didn't actually have what I thought I had,
Right.
like
Yep.
he didn't mean his vows, or whatever way I, look at it. Like I've lost the sense of what I thought I had, and I've lost the sense of my future, envisioning us like getting old together, and that's gone. And so while at the same time I'm grieving that, I'm also trying to like build the new and appreciate the new. For example, I painted my living room purple, which Jamie would never have wanted to live in a house with a purple living room. And I was like, hey, I could do that now. I could just paint it purple, so like trying to find those little bits of joy as I try to like feel like, okay, I accomplished something. It might not be what I thought I was going to accomplish, or it may not be what the direction I thought my life was going in. But yeah, it's kind of running on parallel tracks, allowing myself to grieve, but at the same time trying to build a different future. And I think that's exactly what anybody dealing with a chronic illness goes through, fibromyalgia or otherwise, right? Like it's going to affect the way you live the rest of your life. It's not going to be what you thought it was going to be, but at the same time, it might lead you to different paths. Like I think about Frida Kahlo a lot, who, people have been with me for a while know I'm like totally obsessed with her, and she's been my hero for a long time. But
and for those who don't know, the art behind you there is Frida's work.
Frida,
and Frida.
Yes. And Frida, I have a lot of Fridas. Frida, when she was growing up, she wanted to be a doctor. That was her plan. She was going to go to medical school. And then when she was a teenager, like 18 years old, she was in a terrible bus accident, and it left her with such debilitating pain and injuries. She had like something like 36 spinal surgeries in her life. That as she was recuperating from them, that's where she learned to paint and started to paint. And if you think about like how the world would have missed this amazing, brave artist had she gone on to be a physician. And so I try to sort of embrace, as terrible as it is and as hard as it is, like I'm sure she didn't want that bus accident, but she ultimately kind of was able to embrace the pain that it caused. And that's kind of what inspired some of her work. And I would say if we can find a way to embrace the pain, I'm not saying that I want it. I definitely would happily give fibromyalgia back, and I would definitely happily give up a lot of things to still be in the marriage that I wanted, but it is what it is. And so trying to find some sort of meaning and direction within that has been kind of what's gotten me back. Now I'm just like baby steps, like I'm not by no means, like I regularly burst into tears for commercials featuring like people in love, or like wedding ring commercials, like anything like that, like will just send me off. Like romantic movies, I cannot watch. Love, like music, I don't know if you know this, but like almost every freaking song is about love. And so like there's like 10 songs I can listen to without like causing me to cry in the car. So I'm like,
reminds me of the movie Better Off Dead. He's just gone through a divorce, and every song he turns on the radio.
That is one of my favorite movies. Yes. Oh my God. Yes, that's exactly it. Like I can't listen to the radio. I can't watch it. And so there's like this very limited like window of things. And then, I mean, just as an aside, what's so hard when you get divorced and you have a kid is it's not like just a regular breakup where you can be like, okay, bye, gosh, I don't have to like look at you every week. I don't have to interact with you on a daily basis. Like I can just, so simple. Now it's like really complicated, and have to like find a way to see him every week as we exchange the kiddo and co-parent in a way, that where I'm not bursting into tears in public in a regular and embarrassing manner. So I will say thank you to my therapist.
Yes.
Good therapist. And they are hard to come by. It took me about 5 tries before I found one that I really resonated with. But that has been incredibly helpful because I remember as kind of the divorce was fresh, I remember feeling like, okay, that's it. I'm just going to be like a crazy cat lady. Like I should just get my 8 cats now. And, they're going to find me dead because the neighbors are like, what is that smell? Because I'm going to be alone and just cats and blah, blah, blah. And I remember my therapist being like, really? Are those the only 2 options? Like marriage to Jamie or being gnawed on by your 8 cats after you're dead? And I was like, oh.
Oh, maybe not.
Maybe there's something in the middle. So a good therapist, good, whatever you can find. My best advice, I guess I would say, is whatever kind of person you can find in your life that can be a way to kind of reflect back to, like, we can get in this very black and white, like catastrophizing kind of thinking. And I think, I even see it in my patients where I'm like, okay, like I'd like you to try like a dairy-free diet or a gluten-free diet. And people's first thought often will go to like, you mean I can never eat ice cream again? It's like our brain just goes to this like worst case scenario. And I'm like, oh, I'm just asking you to like try as an experiment, try this new thing for 2 weeks and just gather data. And then you can make a choice, right? You can choose, I'm going to eat this ice cream or not. But it's amazing to me how our brains just go black and white. And I remember when I finally got the diagnosis of fibromyalgia, I remember feeling like it was a death sentence, like my life was over at 26. And I think a lot of people have that experience. And, at that time, I probably couldn't have heard it, but having the reflection back of like, no, your life is not over. It might look different though. It's probably going to look different. How was like when you were diagnosed, because you had been living like you were like working in like sales. You were in like a very different field. You were kind of like on a trajectory and,
Yes, it was. I had been looking for a long time though for answers, and I knew that like something wasn't right. And so when I was diagnosed, my first reaction was just relief. Thank God I found somebody that's going to help me.
Right. And to like know what's
that.
Going on as opposed to just feeling like,
who knows?
Right. And how can somebody help you if like you don't even have a name for what's going on? Yeah.
Right. But then after things kind of settled in a little bit, then there very much was that, okay, well then now what? This can't be all.
Right.
And for me at that point, I just decided that my full-time job was to get better. So like that was my entire focus. How do I get better? What can I try next? What's the result of this experiment? But there's part of your story that I really want to pull out because I think it's super important. Okay. And it's the fact that you can have this vision for your life and something could happen to like make that vision not come true. But that doesn't mean that your purpose in life is just gone. It's going to look different. Right. So the Frida Center closed, but that doesn't mean
that's the other thing.
Yeah, we didn't actually mention that as part of the story.
Yeah.
So gosh, you did the divorce and the losing the Frida Center all happened.
Well, so here's
within a few months, right?
Yeah. Here's the ironic / somewhat infuriating thing is that I actually closed the Frida Center in part because I wanted to spend time focusing on my marriage and kind of, one of the frequent kind of themes that we struggled around was me not being present enough, not having enough time. And so I actually made this huge, I didn't want to let the Frida Center go. It has been my life's work for over a decade and my passion, and something I built with like blood, sweat, and tears and managed to continue even when Jamie left and even through the pandemic. And, something I was so proud of and something that I really did feel like was able to help people, but I also wanted my family to be happy, my marriage to succeed. So I made the decision to close the Frida Center. And then I decided that in like March, and then closed the Frida Center. Takes a few months to close the clinic, so closed at the end of May. And then I started working a part-time job, which, you know, as an aside, I really like it. I'm working in the addiction medicine field, but it's not helping fibromyalgia patients. You know, it was definitely a switch from my like passion life stream kind of trajectory. And so I did that. I felt in large part to kind of save my marriage. And then in spite of that, Jamie still ended things. And that, whew, that's a double whammy.
Talk about losing your identity, right? Like as a wife, as a doctor who helps fibro people. I mean, you're still a mom, but that's kind of like the only piece that's left.
Totally. Believe me. And I remember being like it just felt like all the, like, and I didn't even have a place to live for a while. You know what I mean? Like I was kind of couch surf. I felt completely adrift. It was like all of a sudden, like these core things, you know, like I'm a wife. I'm even my last name I didn't identify with. And, you know, any young women out there listening, do not take a man's name. Just a little aside. Sorry. I didn't even identify with this last name anymore. But yet, because professionally, you know, once you publish a book with a certain name, it's real challenging to like reverse course with that. Although I was tempted. So all of a sudden it was like, I didn't even identify with my name. I didn't identify with anything that I sort of had previously identified as a business owner. You know, all of a sudden I'm like an entrepreneur, all these things that I had.
Right. Your website, your YouTube page, they're all under Dr. Liptan.
All that. Exactly. And I remember being like, oh yeah, like what, why did I do that, you know? And you know, it's sometimes I veer into like an anger place about it. But really, you know, it was my decision. I wanted to take his last name, and I foolishly, romantically thought it was forever, you know? So I didn't, even probably going back, I probably would still, you know, young Ginevra would probably still make the same decision. But now older, wiser Ginevra is like, oof.
Now what?
Wow. Yeah, exactly. So, and you know, you're totally right. Like I had wanted to do, and up until about 2018, I was really trying to focus on the YouTube channel because I wanted to be able to help more people than I could help just in my clinic. And I also wanted to be able to help people with fibromyalgia that weren't able to really read my book for whatever reason. Like some people have told me, like, I just can't even focus enough to read, or, you know, maybe they don't speak English, but, you know, enough to read something, but YouTube with the subtitles could work. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can reach a broader audience that way. But boy, between the pandemic and life explosion, you know, I haven't dedicated any energy to that. And part of what I had hoped to do, honestly, with closing the Frida Center is I was like, okay, at least now I can focus on my marriage and I can focus on kind of building this YouTube channel. But it's all branded around Dr. Liptan, right? It's like drliptan.com, you know, YouTube / Dr. Liptan. And I was like, oh, what do I do? So I've been playing around with it. And what I've decided to do is dedicate, like, come back fighting, come back hard, and rebrand as Dr. Ginevra, because, you know,
that is always who you are.
That is who I am. Yeah. And, you know, I have an unusual first name, and a little bit worried people won't be able to pronounce or spell it, but Dr. G was already taken. So I thought, okay, I gotta be Dr. Ginevra. And, you know, it might be a total bust, but that's what I'm rebranding both YouTube and kind of my professional presence that way.
Which I think is perfect for you. I told you this before, but
yeah.
for you listening, what you see is what you get. Like, this is really what she's like. As your friend and somebody who knows you professionally,
Yeah.
right? This is really what you're like. And I think that Dr. Ginevra makes so much more sense because you're one of us, right? You're a fibro patient too. You are so personable. You don't speak doctorese at us and
That's
things
true.
like that.
That is
so
true.
I think it's just perfect.
Well, thank you, first of all. And for those of you listening, this is also exactly what Tami is like, as a friend and colleague, professional, colleague. And as a second aside, I'm the one that totally pushed her to do the podcast, just saying. She was like, I want to do a podcast.
You get all the credit. Without you, we would not be here today.
No, I just want a little bit of the credit because I gave you that extra note. I was like, you're going to rock it. And you totally have. What was I saying? Yes. So you are totally like this. And I think that is part of what I think that's important. I think that's really important for people with fibromyalgia. I think it's hard to trust. I see a lot of patients really struggle with trusting a doctor, and I totally get that. But I think that we can trust advice so much more easily from somebody who's speaking from personal experience. And I think there's this sort of, at least in Western conventional medicine, there's this very like, I'm Dr. So-and-so and I'm in my white coat and I have everything. I know all the answers and all you need to do is just exercise and lose weight, like, right? Like the worst advice ever. And so I've never identified with that model, certainly. Like that's never felt like me. Like, I never wear a white coat unless I have to or something if I'm working in a hospital. But to me, that feels very, I don't know, there's like this artificial distance that it creates and this artificial sense of like, well, I have it all figured out and I am, this doctor over here. In medical school, I heard a joke once that MD stands for medical deity. And, once you got your MD, you're like, I am perfect. And let me just tell you how to do it. And
there is a certain amount of, doctors are gods, right? Like you have all the answers, whatever you tell me, that's what I do. You don't ask questions. Right. It's but like given to you from above.
Right. It's such an old patriarchal model though. And I think that I kind of had hoped that model was going away. And certainly, things are getting better, but I had this recent experience with taking my kiddo to the doctor. He's been experiencing some symptoms of fibromyalgia. And also for those of you that know me, my son previously was assigned female at birth, but now identifies as male. So goes by he, him pronouns and Kai, K-A-I, his name. But has been, it's kind of like my worst nightmare come true, right? Like he's experiencing symptoms of fibromyalgia and really struggling. And I took him to a rheumatologist because that's what you do, right? And he has a lot of joint pain. So I was like, well, maybe there's like a other rheumatologic thing, and I don't want to be diagnosing you like I'm your mom, like I'm too close, right? And so
you literally wrote the book on it, but yet here we are going to.
Right. But I'm trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, I get it.
And we have to see a pediatric rheumatologist, and there's like 3 of them in Portland. So like, okay, all right, we'll see this person. And I was trying to keep my hopes up, but as soon as this older white man walked into the room, I was like, oh, and both Kai and I kind of looked at each other like, oh, this is maybe not going to be good, right? And it was terrible. It reminded me exactly of how I was treated by many doctors, including some of the top specialists, top rheumatologists in Boston when I was searching for answers. And that was, 25 years ago. And boy, nothing has changed in certain folks. And that was so discouraging. And basically the visit ended with him saying, well, I can give you a fibromyalgia diagnosis if you want, but you don't want that in your chart because then you'll be labeled a pain seeker. And I wanted to reach across the room and strangle this man. I just was like, are you freaking kidding me? And during this time, I hadn't said like, well, I'm a fibromyalgia specialist or anything, because A, it's a little awkward to bring up, and B, I was like so stunned. Like, but my kiddo, I love this. Kai was like, just so you know, my mom is like a fibromyalgia specialist and she's like written the book on it. So you should maybe listen to her. And I was like, you go, kid. And then we walked out basically. And I was like, all right. But
that's like, awesome.
Right? I was like, thank you, kid. But boy, and now we're going to start seeing a naturopath, because I was like, all right, reminder that, Western medicine, he basically was like, there's nothing wrong with you. You need to exercise. I was like, you're telling my depressed 15-year-old kid who hurts everywhere that what he needs to do is exercise? Like, how out of touch are you with what the person in front of you is experiencing? And that experience actually is part of what put an additional fire under me. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, there's still doctors out there that act like this. Like, that's it. I need to be like educating doctors. I need to be out there. I need to be vocal. And I'm really angry. And, I'm partly angry because of things that have happened in my life personally, but there's also just this, like, I don't know, professional anger. Like, I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed that, like, my field, the field of medicine, is still so behind and is still so, not to say that there aren't good doctors out there, and not to say that we have made progress. Like, most doctors, like, do, at least the younger doctors, do believe in fibromyalgia, do understand it's a real condition. And boy, that is an improvement. But when you kind of run into these old dinosaur doctors, like I call them, you're reminded like, oh, there's still a lot that needs to be changed. And I was like, all right, time to get angry, time to like find some positive. So I did not punch him in the face. I did not strangle him. I instead decided to channel it, professionally. So I'm working up the courage to get back on YouTube and trying to get myself back out there. And I think that's what it's going to take. And so now I'm like, okay, time to start working on some continuing medical education projects for doctors. Time to spend doing that. Because that's one of the things I get so many patients or just folks reaching out to me with fibromyalgia are like, do you know a doctor in my area? Can I work with you? So, I mean, I still think there's quite an underserved portion of fibromyalgia patients out there that just aren't getting the medical care that they need. I mean, I'm sure that you see that a lot. And I think you, with coaching, have tried to kind of
fill the gap,
fill in some of the gaps there so that people can like become a better advocate for themselves, working with the doctor that they do have, or trying to find a better doctor. You can probably say it better than me, but I think that's my understanding is that's kind of your.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes even filling in the gap in knowledge too, right? Like, their doctor probably doesn't know about low dose naltrexone. So here, go download this thing and take it into your next appointment.
Totally. And, that's the same thing I did in my book. Like the last 8 pages of the Fibro manual are basically like, here, photocopy this, bring it to your doctor. Here's the study to print out, bring it to your doctor, because boy, you kind of have to bring it to them. And to be fair, at least bulk of the care for fibromyalgia is provided by primary care doctors. And, that was a really hard job going into the pandemic. And with the pandemic, it's become even harder. Like doctors are even more overworked, even more burnt out. And, they really do only get 10 minutes or something with a patient. And it's really hard to accomplish much in that 10 minutes. And it's just, I think we have to like find a way to kind of work within the confines of what our doctor is dealing with, So most doctors don't get paid for the time that they spend answering like a message. but they will get paid for the time that they spend having an appointment. So I always encourage, like, please try to make it that appointment with your primary care doctor. Try, as tempting as it is to like, oh, let me just like send this message. Like, if you want to kind of have that really positive relationship with your doctor where they're able to really work with you and maybe have the time. So maybe if they like have a visit with you and then you give them that article about low dose naltrexone, then maybe they have time to read it that night as opposed to answering messages. I mean, most primary care doctors, and I was one for many years, either stay late or after you get home, do charting for 2 to 3 to 4 hours. So both documentation of the day's visits, but then also there's usually at least an hour or two of answering, my chart messages or email messages or questions.
It's kind of like being a teacher, right?
Yes,
You
exactly.
have to bring home all your stuff to grade at night.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, even though you're only teaching between this time, that's actually a really good analogy. And I think people sometimes don't see that part of it. And so then they're like, my doctor was really short with me or didn't even answer my message. And I'm like, well, one way to kind of help. So one of my mantras is like, help your doctor to help you. Like, you have to make it, you have to spoon feed them information. You have to make it as easy as possible, but then also trying to kind of understand their limitations and their
right. And the model that they're working within too, right?
Exactly.
Like, it's not that your doctor only wants to spend 10 minutes with you.
Exactly.
It's that's all they get paid for.
Exactly. Or literally that's all they're, even separate from the pay issue. I mean, it's like your expectation is your job is to see these 16 to 24 patients
like
in a
quotas
day.
Or something, depending on where you work and who you work for.
And this is why so many primary care doctors quit. So many burn out. And then, of course, the more that quit, the harder it is job for those that remain. And so just so that people know like how broken of a system your doctor is working in and how it's not an excuse for like crappy doctoring, which is what I think my kiddo got. I mean, he didn't even touch my kid. Like I mean, he like sort of squeezed his knees a couple times. And I was like, I kept asking, like, are you going to examine him? I feel like, are you going to ask him some more questions about fibromyalgia? Can you assess him for fibro? I must have asked that 12 times. He was like, you don't want that diagnosis in your chart. I was like, okay, that aside, thanks for that helpful judgment piece there. But could you like actually just doctor for a little minute? As soon as fibromyalgia, the word though, still can be an F word, right? As soon as I brought that up, it was like he just totally closed me. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
See where this is coming from.
So what's next for Dr. Ginevra?
Oh, that sounds good. Well, let's see. I have this kind of exciting project that I'm working on with this cool person named Tami. We can talk about it in a minute. That will be next month. So working on that. It's like a Fibromyalgia Awareness Day event. I'll let Tami give the specifics. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm actually having a lot of fun working with you, Tami. And it's really nice to like have that partnership kind of, that professional partnership. And then I have this crazy idea, also kind of inspired by Tami, that to force myself to launch my YouTube channel, the Dr. Ginevra YouTube channel, for 30 days for the month of May. I'm giving myself one day off because there's 31 days. I'm going to
And we do have one day that's going to be rather full.
Exactly. Yes. So. Although I still might post something there. I'm going to post a video every day to YouTube.
Love it.
And it's going to be, I'm calling it 30 Days of My Fibro Life with Dr. Ginevra. So it should be either a hilarious bust or entertaining for other reasons. But I encourage you to check it out if you're interested. So I think it will be, it's like youtube.com and then / Dr. Ginevra, which is DrGinevra.
Awesome. I love it. And then more long-term, you're thinking train some doctors.
Yep.
Help those dinosaurs know what to do with kiddos like yours. Yep. Patients like us.
Yes, totally. So I've been reaching out and kind of trying to find organizations or folks that are in that field that can kind of help me guide me to the right places, so that I don't have to I don't think I need to recreate the wheel. There's probably some, and I know I've got some good leads on organizations and folks in the Fibro community that have been working on getting this rolling, because it's not just me that is recognizing that there is a huge gap in that. So stay tuned. I'll keep you guys posted, but that is an area that I'm going to really focus on.
Yeah. And you and I have talked a lot that like the biggest thing that both of us can do is make more people like us, right? Because there's just you and there's just me, but the world needs a whole lot more than just you and just me.
So either somebody needs to figure out cloning that's not creepy and weird and going to end up, with like a zombie apocalypse of clones. Or like that is exactly what we need. We need to, I want to train as many healthcare providers as I can to treat fibromyalgia. I think, training as many, like having a fibromyalgia health coach that's like matched up with, a fibromyalgia healthcare provider. How cool. So we got to make like, 10,000 of each and then send them.
That sounds like a perfect plan. I love it.
Right? I mean, how hard could it be?
Exactly. But honestly, like that would make a difference. That would help people feel better. I mean, my clients who have done the best are the ones who were patients of yours as well. Working together it's magic.
Really is. It really is. And I think a health coach can be so useful to help you make some of those hard lifestyle changes. It can be really hard to cut out a favorite food or try a new way of doing things, and so I think getting that moral support, that encouragement, that's helping people to like strategize. Okay, how am I going to make this change? That
my doctor told me to do this. Now,
right.
How am I going to do it?
Exactly. Like I want to be like the healthcare professional can be like, okay, here's what I think you should do, and then the how is absolutely with health coaches. And my patients that have done the best have been those that work with health coaches or that have that kind of like that support person in their life in some other way, because there's not that many coaches out there. Not everybody can access one, but I know you're working on that.
Yep, we sure are. So this big event that we've got planned, y'all, this is going to be so much fun. And we actually we'll edit that out. Give it a sec. We actually have 2 events planned. We have a live one in Portland, Oregon. And since I know a lot of you listening are not in Portland, we also are going to have a virtual event. So for Fibromyalgia Awareness Day,
which is May 12th.
May 12th. Yep. We are going to do a live screening on the big screen of the fibromyalgia documentary, Invisible. Some of you may have already seen it, but you haven't seen it on the big screen. So we were going to be doing that along with a Q&A. Dr. Ginevra and I will be on the Q&A along with some of the filmmakers. We're going to have
the director.
And Nick, the director, will be
star.
Yep.
One of the stars.
Yep, exactly. And then we are also going to be signing books, taking pictures with people, having
goodie bags and door prizes,
red carpet photos, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be awesome. So if you are in Portland, or if you want to come to Portland, we are going to be doing that the day after Awareness Day on Saturday, May 13th in the evening. And you can get all the details on that at Invisible Film PDX, which is the airport code for Portland, invisiblefilmpdx.com. You'll find that in-person event. We are also going to do a virtual screening the next weekend on Saturday, May 20th, followed by a virtual Q&A on Zoom with us as well. So
and we're going to try to find some ways to make that fun as well,
and special too. Yeah,
because I feel like the fibromyalgia community, boy, we are direly in need of fun. As we are, I mean, the pandemic knocked a lot of our fun events out, and so I'm just so excited. I'm so looking forward to being able to like be with the community, fibromyalgia awareness the events where we like can actually get together, whether it's in person or virtual, I always come away from those feeling so inspired and so, I don't know, just like my cup has been filled up. And I think there's just something so amazing about that. So whether it's virtual or in person, I hope you guys will join us.
Yes, absolutely. And some of you heard about my experience trying to go to New York City for
This is a
the
bit of a
world
redo.
premiere. Speaking of things not going as planned, the day of the premiere, I woke up with horrible, horrible vertigo and could not stop throwing up and didn't make it. So this is also my do-over in my pretty dress on the red carpet. So
yes. So we were like, okay, when I heard Tami's story, I was like, oh my gosh, she flew all the way there, had the dress, had the ready for like, I mean, how many red carpet premieres in New York are you going to in your life? And then you freaking can't leave the hotel room because you're so sick with
I couldn't leave the
vertigo.
bed. It was awful.
Gosh, you poor thing. You poor thing. So I am so excited that we get to like give a redo. And because of that, just FYI, we're trying to make it. I mean, it won't be the New York premiere experience, but it'll be the Portland premiere experience. And we like to
West Coast premiere experience.
True. On the West Coast, we like to keep it a little weird, a little loose. So I'm planning on like wearing a fancy dress, but also really comfortable shoes because it's a fibromyalgia awareness event. So
that's exactly right.
Right?
I've got flats, but they're totally sparkly. So, fancy dress and sparkly flats.
I love it. I love it.
So for you to come, you can we're calling it a Portland dress code. And for those of you who are in Portland, you know what I mean here. Like really anything goes, like, please be decent, but
right.
But some of us will be in our fancy dresses and other people be in jeans, and it's cool.
If you feel inspired to wear a cape, come in costume, whatever inspires you. But yes, people will be dressed the gamut between casual and fancy. We're just doing it fancy, Tami and I, because we want that red carpet experience. But we're gonna have like a little selfie station and places. We're just gonna try to make it like really, really fun
special
and lighthearted. I mean, as lighthearted as it can be.
Yes. I mean, it is Fibromyalgia Awareness Day.
Right, exactly. So it's like you can't be like, hey, but I think trying to kind of enjoy each other and enjoy kind of being in that feeling of being together.
And a great educational opportunity too, if you have people you want to bring with you. The film really explains a lot, and of course with our Q&A afterwards, it'll be a great opportunity for you to educate the people in your life about what fibromyalgia is and how it really actually affects people.
And it is an amazing film. It is so well done, and I just am so excited to see a live audience reaction to it.
Same.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. That we all cuddled up in my hotel bed and, watched it on the laptop, but
not quite the same experience that you were.
But in spite of that, there were several places we all cried. So bring your Kleenex, stick some in your pocket. You will need them.
We might need to have some there. I laughed, I cried some more, I laughed some more. Yeah, it was
really great.
It is really great. Yes.
So as we wrap up, I would love to give you just a minute or two to talk to the person listening who has maybe had a life implosion like you did, or even just like their diagnosis has been what blew up their life, and just kind of talk to them from your heart to theirs.
I would say to you, anybody listening who's struggling with a life implosion, painful life event, or the pain of being diagnosed with fibromyalgia and dealing with that kind of reality, the new reality, I would say you can get through this. You can do this. It might not feel like it right now, but there is an inner strength within you that you can find. And try to look for that source of inspiration. Like for me, it has always been Frida Kahlo, because what she was able to create in spite of her true life of pain, just absolute pain and suffering, And she had her own life implosion when Diego, she had a lot of romantic pain as well. And I think if you can find one little piece of inspiration, whatever that is, within that, there is strength. So I would say, search for your inspiration, find the strength to take that next small step, and you can do this. And you are supported by an amazing fibromyalgia community. And there are some wonderful folks in this community that are working so hard as advocates. And I think remembering that you're not alone is so key to getting through this. So Tami and I are right there with you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for that. And for people to find you, give us again all the links and things. By the way, everybody, we will have this at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/106 in our show notes, but go ahead and give us
I would say best place to find me is drginevra.com. So drginevra.com or youtube.com/Dr. Ginevra.
Awesome.
You can also find my book on Amazon, Fibro Manual.
Yes.
Yeah, that too. The Fibro Manual.
We will have links to all of that in today's show notes. Again, it's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/106. Thank you so much, Dr. Ginevra. We'll have to have you back here again now that you're back.
I'd love it. Thank you.
And that wraps up my interview with Dr. Ginevra Liptan. As you might be able to tell in the interview, Dr. Ginevra is a dear friend, and I am thrilled to give her the opportunity to share her story with you. I know that what she's been through in the last year is something you can relate to, even if it's just in bits and pieces. Now, of course, you probably haven't had to close down a medical center, but I'm sure that you've had dreams that you put your heart and your soul into that ultimately died or were taken away. And honestly, we've all been there. Fibromyalgia can feel like an endless taking away of things. It doesn't matter if you're newly diagnosed and you're struggling to find your way, or if you're an expert like Dr. Ginevra and me. You think you have it all figured out, and then boom, life happens. The key to living your best life is not to avoid anything bad happening. That's just not possible. Instead, the key is what you do when something bad happens. My hope is that today's interview will help you feel not so alone. I also want to encourage you to have hope that there is a way out. You can feel better. Brighter days are possible. And there can be a silver lining on the clouds you're facing. Now, if you're interested in joining Dr. Ginevra and I on May 13th for Fibromyalgia Awareness Day and the West Coast premiere of the fibromyalgia documentary Invisible, tickets are on sale now. If you can't join us in Portland, please, we would love to have you come to our virtual screening of the film and Q&A with Dr. Ginevra and myself on May 20th. You can join us virtually from your living room anywhere in the world. I'll have links to purchase tickets to the Portland event on May 13th and the virtual event on May 20th in today's show notes. There will also be a link where you can schedule a film screening in your own community. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/106. And now I've got this week's listener shout out for you. This is an email I received from Debbie in Australia. She says, I love your podcasts. The information you share is so great and easy to understand. I have learned so much from you. Listening to you is also a form of comfort as you know and understand that this is all real. It is also very inspirational to hear how well you are now, considering how bad fibromyalgia had impacted your life earlier on. Thank you again, and please continue to do your podcasts. I look forward to each new one that comes out. Thanks so much, Debbie. And I truly believe our stories have power to teach others, to comfort, to inspire. And honestly, that's why I invited Dr. Ginevra to share her story here today. And I hope you will learn new things from her story as well and be inspired. See you back here next time.